Want to find your seat for the event of your choice but can't get one that fits your desire or your budget? Well, my friends, SeatGeek has you covered. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show. With a list of over hundreds of events to choose from, SeatGeek will assure you that you won't miss your seat with the amazing view of your choice at the most affordable price. Whether it's looking for your best seat in the house of your favorite sports team, finding live concerts that get you closer to your favorite artist, or enjoying your spot at your favorite live shows, comedies, and more, SeatGeek has it all just for you. Go online to SeatGeek.com or download the app on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And as a special offer before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS and save yourself $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket and experience why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Remember, that's SeatGeek.com and download the app on your phone with promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off and find your seat with SeatGeek.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Oh, all right, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't heard, and especially living here in Denver, Colorado, there is a brutal storm, but you know what? This storm ain't shutting this show down because we've got a stacked lineup here for you tonight. This is Jake Silva, Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. Thanks for making us a part of your lovely evening. We are live on all platforms known to man, Roku, iHeartRadio, and all social media platforms for all of you. If you haven't done so already, what are you waiting for? Like, follow, subscribe. Hit the bell button to keep you up to date on future and past episodes. We got a fun one here for you tonight because we ain't got one, we ain't got two, we've got three great interviews, all waiting for you guys to check out here, tuning on in, pop a squat, and hang out with us. Desmond Johnson, Bleav in Panthers, joining us. Dante, I need my college football fixes for week 0. East Coast Gridiron, and of course, Ross Jackson, Locked on Saints, is also going to be joining us here tonight. We got a stacked show. Excited for it. Preseason finale in the NFL. I'm all for it. I am ready for week 1. It could not come sooner. So before we bring on Desmond Johnson here in a couple minutes, so trade alert. It just came out that the Philadelphia Eagles have acquired Jahan Dotson and a 5th rounder from the Washington Commanders for a 3rd and 2 7th-round picks. So it is official. The Philadelphia Eagles are home to both Georgia Bulldogs and Penn State Nittany Lions on this roster. Boy, do they love their Georgia and Penn State boys. So here's what's interesting about this, because I have my NFC standing predictions this coming up here at the bottom half of the hour. And the one thing that's funny about this, I had the Philadelphia Eagles initially going 11-6 only because the schedule is a lot stronger. There's a lot more competition in the NFC than most people anticipate. But much like with the Atlanta Falcons, I think now I got to add an extra win for the Philadelphia Eagles. And you know what? This is all coming together for a reason. Because you've got to make this year work. You got 2 new coordinators. You've got a new wide receiver 3. You've also ended up adding up your secondary with Cooper DeJean, Quinion Mitchell, and multiple others on this great defense. So there is no kidding around now this year. And this is why Nick Sirianni, his seat is heating up as the days go by. You have to make this work. So Jalen Hurts gets now his 3rd weapon on this offense with A.J. Brown and with Devontae Smith. The Eagles, we know last year it was a bad taste in their mouth after they went on that 10-1 run, and then all of a sudden they ended up losing 5 of the last 6 games, only then to lose and get roadhoused by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This ain't happening this year. So the Eagles, you add in Saquon Barkley, you now have Jahan Dotson and multiple others. So this has to be the year you got to make things right. Philadelphia is a tough crowd. It is a tough city because they expect a winning culture. They expect results, and they also expect progress. You ain't checking any of those boxes. You're gone. You're out of here. Philadelphia has done this before. As I've said before previously in my last episodes, they did this with Andy Reid. They did this with Chip Kelly, and they did this with Doug Peterson. Do not be surprised that they do this with Nick Sirianni if all things fail. So I have a really good hopes for the Philadelphia Eagles, but they are a very strong organization. They're a very strong city, and they demand results. And we do live in a caffeinated society, and we're all guilty of this. Why? Because think about it. How many times do you end up shopping on Amazon and you can't wait for the package to come in, but you've got Prime that expedites a lot of your deliveries and comes in quickly? We're just that kind of caffeinated society. We want things right now. We demand wins. We demand positive expectations. And now with 2 new coordinators and new players all around, you can't afford to screw this up. Like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and multiple other coaches have dealt with less than this, but yet you see the results. They are winning these games. So I expect a lot of very good, positive things from the Philadelphia Eagles, but they just added in a new weapon because now you have no choice but to make this right, winning the division, winning playoff games, and potentially getting back into the Super Bowl. That is the most important expectation that Philadelphia has. But you should also be dominating the teams that you know that are not even close to the plateau that the Philadelphia Eagles are in. What a trade. What an upgrade. And I think Jalen Hurts, he's much, much happier than normal. All right, so we've got a stacked interview lineup here tonight. So joining us as our first guest, he talks a lot about this team, and I'll tell you what, they are my favorite NFC best worst team that I think their outcome is going to be better than what last year gave them. I think the offense is really going to be interesting to watch. And he also breaks this down with a former NFL running back, Jonathan Stewart. So joining us, believing in the Panthers this year, Desmond Johnson. I mean, does it kind of just, make sense? Best worst team. The only reason of it is because you think about the result they got last year where Bryce Young is literally working with an older Adam Thielen and literally not a whole lot of pieces to really move the needle for this offense. But this year I got Dave Canales. I've got a new GM who's familiar with this organization, and I got new weapons. So to me, I feel like this is going to be a very interesting team. Does that kind of make sense that this team could be making some noise this year?
Yeah, it does. It does make a lot of sense. And it goes even deeper than that. For folks that aren't diehard Panther fans, they don't know exactly what happened with the coaching staff and what happened last year where it imploded on itself. So we're really kind of giving a mulligan to Bryce Young. We're giving mulligans to the young wide receivers. We were hard on Miles Sanders, the running back we got in from Philly last year, and just looked like he couldn't do anything right. Come to find out, a lot of those players didn't know where they were supposed to be doing. They didn't know what hole to run to. They didn't know really what play they were supposed to be running. We found out earlier this week the Carolina Panthers offense was changed 3 different times during the season last year. So it's impossible to gauge how well Bryce Young did, or the offense as a whole, the team as a whole. I'm just amazed that they were as close as they were in the games they were in. I mean, they were pretty close pretty much every game, but like 2 the whole year. And knowing going into it that they didn't have an idea or clue what they were going to do on offense every single week for 17 weeks. It's just amazing. They can't be worse than what they were last year offensively. So I think that's what's got a lot of Carolina Panther fans a little bit more excited.
Yeah, and and this was kind of hard because honestly, I had faith in Frank Reich that he would have turned this thing around. because knowing with what he's been in with Philadelphia, getting them to the Super Bowl as far as they did, and then Indianapolis, I mean, I just kind of felt bad with the situation. But of course, it's kind of hard when you got an owner that in some ways, respectfully, kind of feels a little incompetent. He expects results right now. He wants this team to end up winning, but it's hard because a lot of this stuff is a slow cook build. So I think adding in the new pieces, a GM who's familiarized playing in this organization, and having a coach that was a quarterback whisperer last year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield. So do you think getting out some of this bad and bringing in, I'd say potentially some really good upgrades is really going to make a difference for this organization and for this roster as a whole, right?
Yeah, I think so. And we talk about this a lot on Bleav in Panthers that I do with Panthers all-time leading rusher Jonathan Stewart and Panthers Sports Illustrated beat writer Skylar Callahan. We talked about this, and Dan Morgan, who comes from a litany of linebackers and middle linebackers in general from Carolina, if there's one thing the Panthers franchise is known for, it's for punching out linebackers from the inception onward for the past 30 years. And something Dan said in his initial press conference and going forward was that he was looking for quote unquote dogs, like guys that will basically resemble former Panthers that he's played with or scouted for or whatever it may be, whether it's a Steve Smith type, a Jonathan Stewart type, a Dan Morgan type. They all kind of have a certain kind of DNA to them. And granted, the Panthers have only been around for 30 years, but when they get that group of guys together, it's only happened, 3 or 4 times. But when they have gotten it going, last time was 2015, it really goes. And it's just basic football. It's run the football, stop the run. Like that's literally what the Panthers are best at doing when they have the personnel to do it. And I think Dave Canales is going to prescribe to that medicine. They've really decided they're going to really run the ball. It's not just lip service. And by retaining Ejiro Evero for a second year to be the defensive coordinator and basically allowing him to get his type of guys in there like Josie Jewell, I don't see the defense. The defense finished, I think, top 2, top 3 in overall yards allowed last year, which is amazing. Although a lot of that, the Panthers offense was giving up really short fields. So it's kind of a warped stat, but we'll take it. So the Panthers having a defense like that, yes, you lost Brian Burns. Yes, you lost Frankie Louvu. You add Jadeveon Clowney. You put some pieces in there. You have a really good draft. We're super excited about Tevin Wallace, the young linebacker, the 3rd-round pick from Kentucky that looks like he might be a steal. He's a perfect example of what I was talking about here at the beginning. He feels like a Panther. Like he feels like he's been here 5 years. He feels like a John Beeson type, a Luke Kuechly type, a Dan Morgan type, a Thomas Davis type. They're already starting to compare him to that a little bit because it's just the little things that you can't teach that he does that are similar to former Panther linebackers. So we're excited. Everyone's excited though. Everyone's 0-0, so we don't have any reason to not be excited. The preseason has looked different than it did last year. You're talking about Frank Wright, and in hindsight, I think a lot of us were just happy we didn't have Matt Rule anymore. So it could have been anybody. But the fact that it was the first quarterback in franchise history, lived in Charlotte 20 years, he was coming home. They were building this Avengers-like coaching staff around him, of all his names and stuff. We didn't think so much about, well, maybe there's too many cooks in the kitchen. We were just happy Matt Rule was gone and that we were getting a fresh start finally, which we had been asking for a year and a half. And then when that fell apart, we didn't get who we wanted. And once we got, so Frank Wright was kind of a consolation prize, but for them to let him go 11 games into the season kind of shows the dysfunction that was going on behind the scenes in that coaching staff. You had coaches going behind Frank Wright's back directly to David Tepper and all this stuff. And in the end, it looks like Frank Wright was the old grandpa with the kids that was babysitting, but didn't know what they were doing in the backyard, trying to, blow up a clubhouse or something. Like he's just there. So until they've relieved him of his duties. So we're excited about it. Dave brings a fresh perspective. He's super positive. He's probably one of the most positive people I've ever seen in my life. But that can, if it doesn't wear you down, that can really be a positive. And Lord knows this franchise needs it. So we're excited about Dave Canales and Dan Morgan.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I've defended Bryce Young and many of the rookies, and I've always said this, is that I will never condemn a player because of what the rookie season was, because at the end of the day, it ain't fair. We haven't really seen a whole lot of the development of what he could possibly look like, because here's the thing. You got an offensive line that every time when it was constantly collapsing, here's Bryce Young. He's running for his life. And then all of a sudden it's like, we never saw the full development up on it. Now I feel like with having new offensive weapons, having, at least a decent offensive line to get things going, but then with Dave Canales, what he's done with Baker Mayfield and coming off of the year before when he was with Sean McVay, it really revamped his career in a sense, because the fact that, he took a lot of heat in Cleveland. I think he also kind of got a little bit of a reality check in Carolina at the time, and then goes to LA. McVay shows him the way of what it means to be a quarterback and how to deal with adversity. Then he comes to Tampa and he does unbelievable stuff with a defensive coach. So I feel like with Dave Canales, he can unlock the potential that we want to see with Bryce Young, because we're in year 2 now. And at this point, we're wiping away the old, we're bringing in the new, and this should be the time where we actually get to see Bryce Young with some nice new pieces.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that, going back to last spring, Bryce wasn't the Panthers weren't the only team that wanted Bryce Young number 1. Like, Houston would have picked him number 1 if they had the number 1 pick, and they were angling to do so. Other teams that were right there in the top 5, they all wanted Bryce Young for the intangibles he showed at Alabama. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. So the talent is there. I think the problem, again, it's hard to gauge his season last year because of everything that was going on around him. To ask a rookie quarterback to learn 3 different offenses in season from various folks in the building. Bryce has said himself in these press conferences this year during training camp that just the simple fact that he's got one person running the offense and teaching it to him is so much better than to basically just have buffet style every 3 or 4 weeks in terms of trying to learn how to play. And I actually got flamed on social media at the end of last year because I had pointed out that Bryce Young's footwork was horrible at the end, really throughout the whole year, but especially towards the end. It was kind of like this lazy kind of step back, like 1-2 times. He's kind of looking around, and it looks like everything is not moving slow enough for him. And it's causing his feet to be not planted properly, and he's airing footballs, things of that sort. Everyone's coming at me. Well, he doesn't have an offensive line. What do you expect? Blah, 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 this and that. I understand all that. The footwork still is messed up. And Dave Canales, when he came in, the very first thing he did was work on his footwork and Bryce Young and put something in front of him to protect him in terms of Robert Hunt and the other guard that they signed. They've made a point to build from the interior out, which they did not do with the Frank Wright regime. They kind of set Bryce up for failure, really. But Dave is kind of setting it up where, all right, if he has a bad season this year, we are going to look at Bryce, and we are going to look at him as, is he an NFL quarterback? Because he's going to have an NFL pro line finally. He's going to have a number of running backs behind him to carry the load. He's going to have wide receivers that can get separation in Dante Johnson, Xavier Legette. He's got a third down guy, Adam Thielen, who was what he was supposed to be last year. Like, they've got pieces in a weak South. The NFC South might be the weakest division in all of football. So they could actually string some wins together and actually be a surprise. Like you said, I would say Carolina too. They were 2-15 last year in their division. No one's clear in terms of who's the best. I think a lot of people are starting to lean towards Atlanta, but Atlanta's going to Atlanta. So you got to kind of just wait and see what happens with them. I'm not saying the Panthers can win the division, but I don't think they're going to finish dead last in the division either. I think they'll be very competitive.
Yeah, I think there's going to be much needed improvement. And like I see with teams that usually don't finish with the best result, what ends up happening is you get a change in coaching regime. You get a change with new players added on from free agency and the draft. And sometimes, depending on positions and depending on like the quality of the hire, usually tells me they may either double, if not potentially triple the wins than what they got last year. And depending on how that, how we outlook it, because I think you're right about this with the NFC South, because, I mean, you've seen the Falcons play their card. I think Terry Fontenot, his plan is starting to come into fruition after getting Judon and Justin Simmons. And then, it seems like the Michael Penix pick wasn't so bad after all. And then you got Tampa, who they got rid of old expiring contracts on the defense. Some of them retired, and now they're coming in with the young. So there's going to be a lot of some, I'd say some shifts here and there if you're out looking on the NFC South as a whole, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, starting with Tampa, they don't have their offensive coordinator anymore. That's Dave Canales. So I'm curious to see what Baker looks like with a new offensive coordinator, because everywhere Dave's been, he's kind of been known as the short quarterback whisperer, so to speak, between Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield. He's made them all look better when they've worked with him in some capacity. So now he's not there. So I'm curious to see what that looks like in Tampa. And you mentioned they're starting the defense kind of over again. They kind of aged out. In Atlanta, it feels like they're trying to go for it now. Like, it feels like they're just putting all their chips in. They've been drafting skill position players the past 3 or 4 years. Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Drake London. They've got guys. Their offensive line is really good. Their defense they've got really good safeties. Atlanta's got the pieces to do something. And if I had to pick a team to get in the playoffs and win a game from the NFC South, it would be Atlanta. I hate to say that, but that's that's the truth. And then you got Tampa and Carolina. Kind of, no one really knows what Carolina is until they really see them. And with Tampa, no one's going to really know how they are offensively until they get out there too. And then you have New Orleans, where, to be honest, I feel like it's the end of the road for New Orleans. They've been kicking the salary cap can down the road for a decade. Mickey Loomis doing magic with the numbers, and I think it's finally caught up to them. Their defense has aged out a bit. Alvin Kamara's a year older. Nobody believes in Derek Carr. Nobody believes in their head coach. He came in with a losing record to begin with. Dennis Allen, he was the coach of the Raiders. So I don't even know how he got this job, but I don't think I don't know if people really believe in the Saints. So honestly, right now, I look at it as Atlanta and then Tampa and Carolina, and then the Saints coming up in the rear.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. I mean, this is a stacked show that we have here tonight because of the fact that we're focusing on the NFC South, because I do have a good friend of mine down below. We're going to be explaining about, the state of the Saints as we kind of look into it a bit. But, I mean, this is going to be really interesting to see how the NFC South really looks like. But I will tell you this, because, I mean, Dave Tepper, when I look at him as an owner, I mean, I know a lot of people kind of viewed it as, he's the kind that I think is somewhat incompetent and somewhat, with the reaction we got from towards the end of the season was just like, it's never always a good look you want to put on a franchise, respectfully, right? And so this is where I think having these hires, it now allows these guys to start to build in the draft, start to outlook, a lot of these free agent guys here that they can bring in that could really upgrade this team. But all it has to come down to is that the team will get better in these spurts. You just got to give it time to cook, because we are in a caffeinated society where everybody wants to microwave these guys, get them to the best of their potential. I mean, how have you really outlooked, Dave Tepper from the time that he purchased this organization and what we're kind of seeing the state of it as of right now? I think this should be now where Panthers fans, there's hope in the building. There's a chance for them to really grow and really kind of get them into that state of relevancy again.
It's tempered hope. Because it almost feels like we've been battered and we're kind of reluctant to go into the next relationship because of what's happened previously. So we were super high at this point last year with Frank Reich and company, just to get burned like in the worst way. And you're talking about a franchise that hasn't had a winning season since 2018. Like, we've been going through it really since David Tepper bought the team. David Tepper has never had a winning season as owner of the Carolina Panthers, which is amazing. He bought the team in 2018. So it's just, we kind of got used to it. We don't want to make our expectations too high. We just did our Bleav in Panthers. We do an annual win-loss thing where Skylar and Stu will pick wins and losses, and I'm the tiebreaker if they both pick the same. And at one point, midway through the year, we had the Panthers at 6-2. It ended up rounding itself out. I think we had them finishing like 8-9 or something like that, which we were actually fine with. We were like, that actually makes a lot of sense. They have a really manageable schedule. After their bye, though, literally the week after their bye, they play Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And then I think they've got Philly in there. The Cowboys are in there. It gets tough, the bottom third of their schedule. So if they can stack wins early, especially divisional wins, because they start off against New Orleans, then who knows? We were talking about that on the show that, the national media never pays attention to Carolina unless they're winning. And even then, they have to be winning a lot. Like, I remember this media, the national media, calling the Panthers the worst 12-0 team in NFL history in 2015 when they went 15-1, because they just couldn't wrap their minds around the Panthers being that good. And no one's going to give them any kind of credit. They're not the Cowboys. They're not going to lead off every talk show and everything else. They're just not. It's just not the way they're going to be. It's a small market. However, there are some things to be very happy with what they've done. It's very unusual for Panther fans to see a Panther front office actually go out and build a team the way you would build a team if someone was like, how would you build an NFL team? They actually went out and did it. They started in the interior. They signed their two biggest signings were the two offensive guards that they signed. They fixed the defensive line. They got their linebacker straight. They figured out the running back situation. They go out and draft a wide receiver. They had the highest separation rate in the league last year. You trade up into the first round to get another wide receiver to pair with it. It was all about getting Bryce weapons, protecting Bryce Young, and basically letting Dan Morgan cook because they're number one on the waiver wire. They're literally, since they had the worst record last year, they're going to have first dibs on whoever gets cut, basically, here after week 3's preseason games when they do the final cuts. So they're in a good spot. Even the holes that they have right now, they'll be able to kind of maneuver through and figure out what to put in there. And Dan Morgan's strength is pro scouting. That's why he kind of got the job. Not necessarily college scouting, but his thing has been he can go find that 54th, 55 man on the roster or that practice squad kid and see if he fits the scheme that he's actually doing and bring him in. And some guy off the street you never heard of, and he can just step in as a starter and go. So we're kind of looking forward to, all of this going down after next week.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty reasonable. 8-9, this year. I think honestly, I mean, like outlooking, the NFC, which, well, I will have my prediction up on here in the bottom half of the hour, but I think it seems reasonable. I kind of, view the Carolina Panthers potentially as a third place team this year because of just the players and the coaches and the people they brought into this building to really kind of get them in the best fashion. So I like it. I like the thought. A final question here for you before we shift over. So Xavier Legette and Jonathan Brooks, these are some two guys I am very excited to watch, especially Xavier Legette, because watching him at South Carolina and the kind of build and the kind of stature he has, I think Bryce Young's really going to love throwing to this guy because the fact that he's being as hyper athletic as he is. How have you kind of broke down both these guys? Let's start with Xavier Legette and how you really see him make an impact with this offense this year.
Oh, hey, he's a specimen. I was kind of curious as to why, because the Panthers had the top pick of the second round of the draft, and they traded up to number 32 to get this kid. And I was like, why did they do that? Because Buffalo wasn't going to draft this kid. Like, why didn't they just wait till the second round? They liked him so much, they wanted to be able to give him a fifth-year option. And that's kind of the thing there in terms of him. He kind of built like DK Metcalf a little bit, like that country boy strong. Like, I don't think he lifts weights or anything, but he's just like cut like Diesel. Fast, can separate, can get high in the air for catches. The nexus point. He's gonna have to fight for his spot. But they got big plans for him going forward. That's why they went up into the first round to go get him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm like, and I even kept an eye on him because I thought the same thing too. I thought Buffalo would have had the chance to end up getting somebody like that. Instead, they go on with Keon Coleman, which, again, not a bad draft pick. I just think this year, with as deep as the wide receivers have gone, I mean, anything was possible with these guys. And you can never go wrong with having enough weapons, in a wide receiver room, right? And so finally, Jonathan Brooks, I think this guy, watching him at Texas with a lot of his film, he's the kind of guy that really loves a little more of that ground and pound stuff, but he also comes in with pretty good speed. I know he's kind of sidelined at the moment, but how do you really expect Jonathan Brooks this year to look like? Because I think, I mean, I've watched Panther running backs all throughout the years. D'Angelo, I've even watched, multiple running backs, even former running back Jonathan Stewart himself. And so, I would be real. How is he kind of broke down that with Jonathan Brooks? I mean, I think he's interesting.
We thought he was the best running back in the draft. So we were kind of surprised that we were able to get him. There was such a run on quarterbacks early in the first round that it made some stuff available late first, early second, going that way that we didn't think was going to be there. So for them to get Legette, however you pronounce it, and to get Jonathan Brooks, to pair him with Chuba Hubbard, to pair him with Miles Sanders, whoever that's going to be behind this revamped offensive line. I love it. The Panthers need to run the ball 30, 35, 40 times a game. Bryce doesn't have to be out there throwing it, 45 times or whatever to prove a point. Just run the offense. Run offense, let it come to you, grow into the role. And they've given you some weapons and some things to make it a little bit easier. Like, you don't have to push. Like, it felt like sometimes last year felt like he was having to push just to prove a point to whoever on the sideline. He seems more relaxed this year. And from reports from Skylar at training camp, he's been pretty much on the money in terms of his throws, his accuracy, his anticipation is off the chart this year. He's thrown it to spots, not to players. I'm really excited to see what he does, but having those receivers and having this running back, Brooks, who probably won't start the season because he's still coming off of injury, maybe might see him by the end of September, but explosive guy. And he was behind Bijan Robinson at Texas, so you really saw him for a year, but the year he had got him drafted early in the second round. So we're excited about him for sure.
Yeah, this year is going to be really interesting. I'm curious to see how the Carolina Panthers really favor out this year, but I've got some pretty good feelings, good hopes for them. I'll tell you what, though, man, because like I certainly would have loved to have had Jonathan Stewart up onto the show. I've reached out. I had a former Carolina Panther at one point, Rod Smith, the football IQ. The guy's great, and he broke it down perfectly when it came to Bryce Young's build. And then not to mention adding these guys up around. So this is going to be an interesting season, man. So I'm keeping an eye out on the Carolina Panthers this year and how the state of the NFC South looks like. Desmond, appreciate you taking up on the time, my friend. Where can people find you to keep the hope and believing in the Carolina Panthers?
So I own Tobacco Road Sports Radio here in North Carolina. We cover everything from NASCAR to ACC sports to pro wrestling and the Panthers. You can follow the Bleav in Panthers podcast on X at Bleav in Panthers. You can come to the YouTube channel and check out our shows. We're live every Tuesday at 10:30 during the season. It's interactive, so the fans can actually participate in the show, ask questions. It's open mailbag throughout, so you get a chance to ask a NFL player like Jonathan Stewart or an NFL beat writer like Skylar pointed questions about the team. The channel's at youtube.com/at Tobacco Road Sports Radio. And the Bleav in Panthers tab is there. So you'll be able to catch all of our stuff there. And we're back full blown now. So we'll have a new episode this Tuesday at 10:30. And just found out today that Dave Canales is planning on playing Bryce Young in the starters here in preseason game 3, which I have no idea why he's going to, but that's what he wants to do. I think the Bills already said they're not playing their starters. So we'll see how long he keeps Bryce and the boys out there.
Oh, man, it's going to be interesting. But, yeah, I mean, if that's the case, I got to take a look and see kind of, how Bryce Young really feels comfortable in this pocket, because I'm getting all the NFL insights like in the next couple of weeks. I've been busy with this stuff. So I'm excited. I cannot wait. I think this is probably the most stacked NFL season I think we've ever had in a long time. So there's lots of potential. Divisions are going to look different. So I'm excited for what the season's going to bring. Desmond, appreciate you, man. Take care of yourself. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we shall see how the Panthers favor out this year.
All right, Jake. Appreciate you having me on, and anytime you need me, man, just let me know.
You bet, man. All right, so we are staying in the division, and of course, I know he heard a bunch of what the Carolina Panthers' expectations are, but this time we're going to shift over and see what fate has in store for the New Orleans Saints. And so joining us, locked on the New Orleans Saints, here is Ross Jackson. I know you're pretty much taking in every note from, keeping tabs on the Carolina Panthers. But like I said, I think the NFC South, there's so many different components now, because you just saw what Atlanta's cards they threw out there. Tampa's out with the old, in with the young, and then Carolina, you just got to make Bryce Young work. And so at this point, looking at the state of the Saints, I mean, last year, this is how I broke it down. I thought the Saints were going to win this division. Why? Because Derek Carr, for years being with the Raiders, never had a top 15 defense. He comes into New Orleans, goes in with Dennis Allen, and then all of a sudden it took a different turn. So recapping of last year and what the expectations this year, how do you really kind of describe that feeling for a lot of Saints fans?
Yeah, I think as of right now, everyone's just waiting for improvement. I think that's the biggest thing. And of course, the Saints went out. They went and found a new offensive coordinator this offseason, bringing in Clint Kubiak, the former passing game specialist from the San Francisco 49ers. Head coach Dennis Allen has always been very kind of, complimentary of the Shanahan system, the Kubiak system, which is the same thing. Gary Kubiak and Kyle Shanahan building that system years and years ago with the Denver Broncos, following sort of that Bill Walsh, George Seifert kind of training line. And so everybody's just kind of waiting to see, The one thing that everybody knows about the New Orleans Saints is that the defense is going to be solid. Defense is going to be very likely a top 10 defense. They'd love to be a top 5, top 3 defense again. We'll see if they can get there, but I think top 10 is reasonable for them. The big question is, what's the offense going to look like? Is their offensive line going to be able to hold up to allow them to be able to maximize this new system? Those are going to be the biggest things. So I would say Saints fans right now, from what I've seen and those that I've talked to, a lot of it is really just kind of wait and see how everything goes.
Yeah, and I mean, you still have at least really good pieces that I like. I mean, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, there are a couple of guys that I do like both offensively and defensively. When you look at some of their veterans they have right now with Marshawn Lattimore, Demario Davis, and Cam Jordan, how do you really perspect, with these players? Because for as long and as solid as they kept this defense, there's only so much of it that they're going to pour out until some of these young kids, they got to start stepping into that role. And then that's where they got to at least keep this defense intact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that you see across this New Orleans Saints defense. I think it's easy to fixate kind of on the guys that are already older, but it's harder to kind of take a look to see who's going to end up stepping into those roles if you're not covering the team, right? So seeing Cam Jordan, if Cam Jordan, has a lesser season this year, which I expect he's going to probably play a career low in snaps this year, that's okay, because you got Carl Granderson and Chase Young that are kind of really kind of helping to bolster this New Orleans Saints defensive pass rush, at least from what we've seen so far in training camp when we were out there covering training camp in Irvine, California. Now, of course, back here in New Orleans. Marshawn Lattimore, is he going to be able to finish or play, the majority of a season where he's missed some considerable time over the course of the past couple of years? Well, if not, that's why you've got Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor, and then they just drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama in the second round, who right now is dealing with a knee injury, but should be ready to go week 1. And then same thing at the linebacker spot. What happens if Demario Davis regresses? I think that is the biggest hit that you might take as a New Orleans Saints defense, because Demario Davis is such an important part of the fabric of the success of this New Orleans Saints defense. But that's why you add a guy like Willie Gay this offseason and you give Pete Werner an extension. Same thing goes at safety as well with Tyrann Mathieu. So yeah, there's the older guys that are a year older and all those other things, but there's also all these younger guys that are now experienced, have a lot of opportunity to be able to step up in those roles should they be called upon, or at least handle the roles that they're in charge of now.
So my criticism, and is being America's honesty mind, I always like to find the silver lining between both stories. And one of those stories is surrounding Dennis Allen. Now, I know that, like, from a defensive perspective, he's had a lot of really good players get the best potential in them on the defensive side of the ball. But we've also have seen many coaches that usually their cards end up folding because they tend to pull the reins too much. The offense can't seem to get, move the chains, get the first downs, get the scores that they need to, and even trying to get those wins that they know they got to have if they want any kind of playoff, spot. So with Dennis Allen, there's a lot on the line here. And so how have you really looked at Dennis Allen with his fate as a head coach? Because I just see this, that if this thing fails with 35% of his winning, the Saints the Saints fans are going to want something new. And I think because of where the league is shifting, they're going to want something that's a little bit more pro offense. Is that kind of a safe criticism to say for Dennis Allen?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think Dennis Allen would probably agree with that. He knows very well that he's got to win this season as well. I Believe he still sits with either one of the lowest, if not the lowest, winning percentages amongst active NFL quarterbacks. Like, it's not necessarily a criticism. That's just the truth, right? Like, that's just what the numbers are. And I think Dennis Allen's very aware of that as well. And so he's just as invested in winning the season as the Saints fans are as well, because I don't know if it will be his job, but it very well could be if the team doesn't win. But look, they revamped almost their entire offensive coaching staff. They changed every position coach on the offense with the exception of tight ends coach Clancy Barone, who's a legendary coach in the NFL. So why would you change that over? And then they bring in Clint Kubiak, an offensive coordinator, Andrew Janoko at quarterback coach. They add these supremely talented developers like Keith Williams at wide receiver coach and Derek Foster at running backs coach and everything. And Dennis Allen effectively says, okay, here you go. Here's the reins of the offense. Like, you take care of that because the offense was the big issue last year. It took them about 11 games plus a bye week to, well, I guess 10 games plus a bye week to really finally actually start producing on the offensive side on a consistent basis and using things consistently like play action and motion. All those things are now intrinsic to this new wide zone system that they're bringing in. The question is, how long will it take for them to be able to execute it? You can have a great system with a bunch of great plays and it all looks fantastic on paper and in the playbook and everything like that, but can you do it on the field? And that's something we just won't know until the New Orleans Saints hit the field, I guess, against Carolina, but really they're going to be put to the test the second and third weeks going up against the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. And they got the Atlanta Falcons after that and the Kansas City Chiefs right after that. That 4-game stretch is going to tell you everything you need to know about who this New Orleans Saints team either is or isn't, and kind of sets up everything in terms of what the end of the season could look like for this coaching staff or for the head coach and Dennis Allen. But I would say that Dennis Allen is a guy that has been supremely realistic at all times whenever we've spoken to him in pressers and all these other things. I'm sure that he looks at this as just as much a need to win season as anybody looks at it for him. Now let's see if he's going to be able to go out and do it.
So 2 quick fire questions before letting you go from here is, so Spencer Rattler is an interesting pick to me because the fact that a lot of people have speculated, he's got a great arm. He's also somebody that can move out the pocket. I mean, I've seen him from his worst up in Oklahoma and then comes into South Carolina and it's revamped. How have you really broken down Spencer Rattler? And is there a point that if something were to happen with Derek Carr with either performance-based or maybe there's a kind of an injury that could happen? I mean, how do you really expect, Spencer Rattler this year? And could we actually see him this year?
Yeah, I don't think that you will unless there's an injury. That's going to be the way that the New Orleans Saints are going to approach this. They're typically not going to turn the reins over to a rookie quarterback that was drafted in the 5th round if their quarterback that they went to free agency and spent money on and, really wanted and all these other things is healthy on the roster. So unless there's an injury, and by the way, I think you saw that all of last season as well, because the Saints at any point early on in the year could have said, Derek Carr's performance isn't good enough. We should turn to Jameis Winston. And they never did that. And he's on the same contract now as he was then. So it seems unlikely that they would do that kind of a thing. But here's what I will say about Spencer Rattler that I don't think he gets enough credit for. It's his energy and it's his leadership. Like, guys rally around him. And I think that's an important thing. And so I'm excited to see what Spencer Rattler's future trajectory is going to look like. I don't think that we're really going to know Spencer Rattler until 2025, 2026. Right now, he's engaged in a backup quarterback battle with second-year quarterback out of Fresno State, Jake Haener, and Spencer Rattler's not winning right now. Neither is Jake Haener. Those guys are kind of neck and neck and everything. And so what does Spencer Rattler look like? He looks like a rookie quarterback adjusting to the NFL game. And that's exactly what he needs to look like right now. And they can get the rest of that stuff figured out as they continue to try to develop him moving forward. The Saints have never really been a place to develop rookie quarterbacks or young quarterbacks, but I think that that's changing now with this offensive coaching staff. Let's see what they're going to be able to do with all the tools that Spencer Rattler provides over the course of the next couple of years.
Love it. Well said. I mean, like I said, I want a lot of these rookie quarterbacks to succeed. I mean, that's always been me because that's kind of the expectancy when you go into an organization trying to flip a switch. That's what you want. So finally, record prediction and kind of an outlook of the 2024 season for the New Orleans Saints, because we know a lot is on the line, and this is where the Saints really have to prove themselves this year.
Yeah. I expect this team to be competitive, but I'm not going to be surprised if they don't get into double-digit wins. If they fall somewhere between 7 and 9 wins, that won't be supremely surprising to me. And in this division, 9 wins could potentially get you into the playoffs, so that might be all you need as well. But look, what I'll say is I haven't seen anything from the Saints that makes me believe that they should be worse than they were last year. But at the same time, I don't know that their roster really got better over the course of this offseason. I think that they focus more on the coaching staff than they focus on the roster, which is the reverse of what they did the year before, where they focus on the roster instead of the coaching staff. So it's kind of a 2-part thing. I'm not saying anything about negligence. I just think they kind of did it in 2 parts as opposed to doing it all at once, kind of like Atlanta did this offseason, where they did a good job addressing all of it at one time. And so New Orleans, I think, is kind of in the second part of maybe 2, maybe 3 years of the process at the moment. And so I wouldn't say that they necessarily improved their roster, but I would say that the scheme has the opportunity to elevate the roster now, which last year's scheme with offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael absolutely did not have that opportunity. And so I think that that's going to be the thing that maybe tips them over into those double-digit wins. But, if I had to pick a record prediction for them right now, I'd say that they're somewhere in the 7-10, 8-9 range. And then if they're able to win a couple of those early games against, games that they shouldn't win, going up against Dallas, Philly, or Kansas City, then all of a sudden they're in a situation to where they could be a double-digit win team. But until I see those, I can't pick them as a winning team right now.
Love it, man. Appreciate the insights. Ross, where can people find you to get locked in on the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, you can find the Locked On Saints podcast free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. You can find the written work over at louisianasports.net. We're on the Saints beat writer, and you can all find it in the same place, all in one place right now on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson Nola, Nola.
There you go. Side note, my goal is I want to be there in New Orleans for the Super Bowl. That's why we're working as hard as we are, getting these interviews, getting these insights, and really taking, the show up out into NOLA. So I'm excited about it. Appreciate you, Ross. Thanks for taking the time to be on with us, and we shall see how the state of the Saints really pan out this year. Take care, my friend.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me. Take care. Stay safe. Let me know when you're here in New Orleans. Let's get together.
Let's do it, man. All right. So college football is so deep, and it is exciting because week 0 is amongst us. And thanks to my partners at BetUS, I've got my free copy of College Football 25, and with as realistic as it gets. This year's going to be chock full of really interesting stuff, great prospects, and not to mention conference realignments as well. And to break down all of that, where him and his crew, amazing jobs, amazing stuff. In fact, he is the one responsible for sending me the film of Drake May. So I had an idea what I was getting into during the draft. So joining us, my good friend, I plan to have every week here, once a week, here on the show to break down all my college football fixes. Dante, East Coast Gridiron. This year, it doesn't get any better than that with the college football playoffs now at 12 teams. And the transfer portal and all the rest of it. And not to mention too, college football 25 is back. This is going to be the biggest college football season I think we are having this year.
Yeah, man, it's a big one. It sucks that the Pac-12 had to dismantle itself because of legal reasons after they had such an amazing year last year. It's like I was telling my friends, I'm like, think about when the Pac-12 was really, really good like it was last year, and it just was you could look at it as a bittersweet. They had a great hoorah, but we're going to miss them being around. Even though they're still a conference, I wouldn't consider a 2-team conference to be a powerhouse conference at this point in time. They're only competing against or Washington State and Oregon State are only competing against each other, but this is going to be an exciting year. Obviously, the inaugural season of the 12-team playoff is something that we all been looking forward to, and it's going to be around for a short time until we move on to a 14-team playoff. I think it's only 2 or 3 years, and then we'll see that roll. It's give us another element to college football that we haven't seen. So, Jake, we grew up in the BCS era, so all of this is. As adults watching this pan out, it's still a little weird the way that the way that things have shaken out. We think about the NFL being the playoff type of league, and now we obviously, we're there with college football, and we're deep in this year, so we get to see how that pans out as well.
It's funny because even in the BCS, you had to fight harder in order to get into the BCS to even be considered in that championship, and now because it's so deep. NIL, and now we got 12 teams coming up on here. I think we live for, and this is what's hard because sometimes we got to deal with those old heads that are afraid of change. And my thing is, why would, I think of it as we're getting an invitation to the gala, right? Because you're going to get Alabama, Ohio State, you're going to get all these teams. But then when you sprinkle in a little bit of an Iowa, or maybe even, like a Michigan State. Some of these teams that we haven't really truthfully seen the best of them in these kinds of regards. I think they finally get a taste to be in the gala. They get their invitation and see what it's like to be with these big dogs.
Yeah, so teams like that I'm interested in this year, and we've talked about a bunch, is like the teams like Penn State that can't get past the hump of the Michigan and Ohio States every year. But James Franklin does have a Big Ten title under his belt as well. So can he, be as good as he has been? Let's beat everybody but those teams. And will the committee decide that, hey, those games, if they are close, does that warrant them to be part of the 12 best teams? Because as I told my guys the other day, we were talking about this. It doesn't matter what the Associated Press does, because when week 14 comes around, it's totally different. They're going to take all the names, they're going to mix them up, and it's going to be a totally different top 25 than we're used to. I remember, a couple years ago when we saw Minnesota have that upset game, and they went all the way from 20-something to 14th, just out of nowhere. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think, I'm really interested to see what the group of 5 schools, how they're going to get involved. One team that we highlighted a lot was Liberty from last year. Liberty went undefeated, and of course they got their butt kicks against Oregon in their bowl game. But who really counts bowl games, anymore, with everybody that opts out and stuff? And they had to go against the gauntlet of Oregon losing twice to Washington last year. But can Boise State just made a big change at quarterback. I mean, Maddox Madsen is now the starter over Malachi Nelson, so former 5-star. So how's their team going to shake out now with their 3-1 coach that came in after the last coach got fired? So you throw those teams in there, and how does that mix up? It's really what it's going to do is it's going to put pressure on the big teams to be really, really good, because we could see 2 group of 5 schools sneak in there, and everybody's going to be scratching their head like, why are they there? And I'm sitting here telling you, like, it could happen. Like, teams cannot, just because it's 12 teams cannot come in and take losses that they shouldn't, that they shouldn't take, because 2 group of 5 schools are definitely going to be in it if that happens. And that's the type of stuff that obviously we can't wait to see. Remember when Boise State went undefeated with Kellen Moore, and they never got a chance to sniff it? Or what about UCF when they called themselves the national champions, a couple years ago after they went undefeated? Like, we never got to see those teams. So definitely, if you go undefeated as a group of 5 school, there should be no reason, no justification why they should be out of it. So that's what makes this so exciting this year too, is we get that Cinderella story like basketball has with their big tournament.
Yeah, and it's funny. Yeah. I mean, and here's the other thing though too, is like, I love this program. I really, really do. But that's also too that there should be no excuse of using the word travesty when it comes to you didn't make it into the playoff, and then you get boat raced by Georgia. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, we got teased so bad last year. I mentioned the Pac-12 thing, but there's nobody on planet Earth that can tell me that Georgia wouldn't have won a national championship if they were the last 4 teams. Regardless if you liked how good Michigan was, they played cupcakes up until the last 4 or 5 teams that they played on their schedule. They had the easiest road to a national championship, but they had the hardest road when they got to the back end of their schedule as well. And they proved it. They got through it, and rightfully so. When they got ranked number 1, it was not a surprise to anybody in the country. But on the other end is Georgia took a loss to their rival Alabama, and then they never got a chance to come back and avenge that. What would it have looked like last year if we would have had a 12-team playoff? They would have been, I don't care what nobody says, they would have been the national champions, because they would have came back with the fire and fury. And Kirby Smart does not lose twice to the same team.
That's true.
It's never happened.
Yep. Kirby Smart's just too smart for that, dude. Like that's the one thing is like, and we'll break it down as well while we go through on the show. And, because again, you just know exactly all these tough programs that have familiarity being in a playoff setting, and they've even won a national title. That's why, like, once Nick Saban retired and hung him up, this is all just Kirby Smart's world now, because the fact that the SEC, it has been stronger. It's never really kind of taken a fall And now we got two teams now in it. And, I just think the Big Ten, you are going to get some strong programs in there, like in Iowa and multiple that are going to want to compete with you. Great defenses. And this has to be the year that Ryan Day really changes the narrative. So before in that, the Big Ten, I've spoken with a couple people in the past, Ohio State and even with Washington. So adding in Washington, Oregon, UCLA, and USC, it's a different kind of beast they're dealing with because this is where your defenses do get tested a lot. So, you're going to get offensive plays, but these defenses, like if you're facing Michigan, Ohio State, and a lot of them, these are some defenses that are going to want to play trench warfare with you. And the question is, do you have the right pieces to really go against them? I think Washington and Oregon will be fine. I think Jed Fish, what he's done in Arizona and to come into Washington, it may not be a right away situation, but give this puppy 2-3 years. That program is going to be just fine. And Dan
100%.
Lanning, do I really need to explain any more about how great Dan Lanning's put together? It makes you smile because you and I have been on this boat. Bo Nix, quarterback, one of the Denver Broncos, living here now and hearing the hype. It just got to make you feel good about Oregon's product. So this is going to be interesting to watch this year, isn't it?
Yeah, so especially with Oregon, man. Out of all people, I've been waving the Bo Nix flag, and now he's a starter. Even my wife texted me. I was like, we've been standing in the room by ourselves, and it's okay. We made it. As long as he got named a starter, we made it, right?
Yep.
But if you think about the things that Oregon has done, the one thing, especially with them, that had happened that they didn't have before was an overall great defense. Now, Dan Lanning was a defensive coordinator for Georgia when they won the national championship. He's a product of that Saban, Kirby Smart type of team. But what had happened is he relied more on his offense and let Will Stein and the Kenny Dillinghams of the world run the show.
Yeah.
Now, Will Stein's going to find himself a job this year, coming up if they're successful. If they even sniff a Big Ten championship, Will Stein's going to be the next best coach that's going to go somewhere and do something crazy. Just like how I felt about Sean Lewis at Colorado. Colorado sucked last year by all accounts. They had 4 wins and landed at last in their division, and people want to act like it was such an improvement. Yeah, you improved by wins, but you were still last in your division. But Sean Lewis is still that guy. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be the head coach of San Diego State right now and bring the guys with him that had come over. So, I'm not a half glass full kind of guy when I look at teams, but one of the things that Dan Lanning did do on the transfer portal this year is he addressed the secondary, which that was the weakest spot on the team. He brings 2 guys in. They're going to go ahead and strengthen that team up. But what's so smart about with him and Will Stein, however they're configuring their offenses, is he brings Dylan Gabriel over. And then not only do you bring Dylan Gabriel over, but you bring another guy that was a starter at UCLA that's primetime guy, Dante Moore, who's a 4-star. And he's your backup, and he's your quarterback for the future for at least the next 2 years after Dylan is gone. To have kept both of them together and then for them to be, in the same quarterback room and them not battling each other is a great problem to have. So, by all regards, whatever voodoo magic that Dan Lanning's got going on in Oregon, they're dumping all the money that they can with those kids. Nike's dumping all the money that they can to get those kids over. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with, especially now. NIL, it should just be called the Nike era because it's about to be over for a lot of teams, especially. And it seems like he's going to be their coach for a long time. We had even discussed at one point, will Dan Lanning jump ship and go to Alabama when it just seemed like that was a perfect spot for him to go to. But he stayed with Oregon. I was like, he's going to be there for a long time. And he's going to be there until they win about 4 or 5 championships. And I believe that they can too. So if that's any indication of what Oregon's going to do in the Big Ten, you got another powerhouse, like you mentioned, in Jed Fish that's going to come over and get that program. That's if he decides to stay as long as what we think he's going to. Because he could. His alma mater is Florida. And Billy Napier might not be there this year. So that's, that's one thing that he could jump ship, and then he automatically has got all the assets there and being an alma mater kind of guy from there too. UCLA, they might have it a little rough because Chip Kelly went up and left and brought that running prowess that he's about to have with the 2 best running backs. I think they're going to be the best two-headed monster in Ohio State. And then USC. Lincoln Riley's his thing has always been defense. Yes. Now you bring a guy over that was an NFL caliber guy. Can he get that defense running? So it's interesting. There's a lot of storylines, but then also when you talk about the Big Ten too, I know you mentioned Iowa. Iowa has the easiest road to go back to the Big Ten championship.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I every time when I look at these schedules, dude, it's like, for one, and we'll get even deeper with Alabama because it's like you and I talked about. They need a CEO in this room because the fact that like these schedules with the way that they're put together, I mean, granted, like nobody should be complaining at this point with a 12-team playoff. But when you look at that strength of the schedule, I mean, I want to see positive results with some of these programs. But it's like each time it's like, man, I got Colorado on their schedule where it's just like there's about maybe 3-4 games, and then it's just brutal. And it's just like, how in the hell are you going to get out of this well? Like, the
Colorado thing drives me crazy when people think that they're gonna, if they're a bowl eligible team, I will literally take my hat off, throw it in the air, and start clapping for what they have done, because that would be an amazing turnaround for what they've had. But then again, like we said with Iowa only has to play Ohio State, man, and that's the hardest team on their schedule. Well, I mean, I put Nebraska down there. That's their last game on their schedule. Who knows what Nebraska is going to look like? But you can't tell me that they can't go in there and beat Minnesota, Washington, Michigan State, and Wisconsin and UCLA this year. Like, it's,
tell you what, they are looking good, man. I mean, I've seen videos. Matt Rule is cooking some good stuff there in Nebraska.
They're the hardest team to predict, man. But I was not a Dylan Raiola fan, let me tell you. I don't like the fact that kid went to 3 different high schools and flip-flop commitments from Georgia, then went to Nebraska. But then when you really look at it, his dad is a coach there. So then you kind of soften up and you're like, okay, who wouldn't want to play under the dad? And then, you're rooting for Matt Rule at the same time because you know how he turns programs around in 2 years. So, but then you look how he played in the spring game. I literally had, I'll call a ball, a strike, Jake. You see me change my tune, and I'm like, hey, you got to prove it to me.
Yep.
But him and Arch Manning in their spring games, I was like, I got nothing else bad to say. I think they're good to go. And Dylan Raiola is a freshman. He looked like he's a 5th-year senior.
Yeah. Oh my God. The guy was he was showing such amazing flashes of like just a lot of his play. I'm like, this kid, and it's funny because I even thought of, somebody mentioned it to me. They were like, dude, you got to check this kid out at Missouri. Like between Raiola and the kid at Missouri, holy crap, man. These guys could be easily.
Add DJ Lagway from Florida in there. I don't know where these kids got created from or whatever their off-season workout program is. They look like they're created out of a lab. I know people say that, but I'm like, they look like they're superheroes, man. It's crazy. I'm like, dang, if I was that big and that muscular and had the athleticism as them as freshmen in college,
yeah,
that's insane.
Give me the what are they drinking in the water, dude? Give me some of that stuff. Like, you know what I mean?
They spiking the Gatorade and University of Florida, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Like Kool-Aid is what it really is.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's something.
So I'll tell you what, because you even mentioned it with USC and with Lincoln Riley. And you know what? This is a funny side note. Okay, so I know they brought in, an NFL caliber in like a defensive coordinator because they could not find any of their defensive coordinators, and that has been a big problem with Lincoln Riley. But we can high praise the fact that he is just that much of a genius as an offensive mind. Now, USC has dealt with a bunch of turmoil since Pete Carroll left, right? And you're trying so hard to get this program back to its relevancy. I made a point that because it's not really what Lincoln Riley is doing wrong. It's the fact that you are trying to dig up from an abyss that the USC Trojans had been in for a long amount of years. And I just feel like if I'm Lincoln Riley, man, I mean, I know it's a lot of money, but here's the thing. Look at some of these offensive coordinators that are in the NFL. They're starting this way, showing off their talents, and then they go and potentially get head coaching jobs. That's why I think Ben Johnson's going to be great, getting a head coaching job at some point, because there's always 7 to 8 jobs open. But here's a funny note to give you. You know who came back into the campus that I'm sure you saw news on is Pete Carroll himself. That's going to make you smile. And here's the thing. Even though he's saying he's there to just be a teacher, you don't think Lincoln Riley's going to probably knock on his door in the classroom dorm and just literally be like, please, Pete, show me your ways of how you coach this defense, because you are the heart and soul of USC. I mean, is that a possibility, or am I kind of thinking way too much on this idea?
You're not thinking, in the small box, man. You're thinking outside the box for sure. Like, if that's the one guy that you have to lean on and ask questions to that had stellar defenses throughout the years, like, I'm telling you right now, Jake, I 100% will tell you this with the utmost confidence. Nick Saban won all these national championships over the years. I think if Pete Carroll was still coaching at USC, he would have maybe half of those, if not a quarter, of national championships, because they would be battling out in national championships for years. Yeah. And with the defenses that Pete Carroll was putting out and how abysmal that the Pac-12 was like,
oh yeah,
he would have ate there. Now, what would be funny is if D'Anthony Lynn, who's Anthony Lynn's son, who's a defensive coordinator there, that's been around nothing but NFL caliber defenses his whole career, can he turn them around? And if he can't, Pete Carroll's already said, I want to coach again.
Yeah, he did.
and to be honest, bro, like, as much as people hate Lincoln Riley and what he has been doing from Oklahoma to now, you can't deny the fact that the dude knows how to turn out quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So if you can get a competent offensive coordinator, I don't know why they just didn't keep Cliff Kingsbury there. I would have thrown a hell of a lot of money on there for him to stay there, because I think he's creative enough to be a college OC. And then what if Pete Carroll's like, this thing with Coach Lynn doesn't work out and Pete Carroll comes in? You couldn't tell me right now with a straight face that I wouldn't say that, man, they might. The one thing why the Seahawks have been good for so many years is because Pete Carroll's had the football scouting mentality all these years. Tyler Lockett, Doug Baldwin, DK Metcalf, when everybody knew DK Metcalf was huge, but nobody knew that he was going to be this good. Yep. I mean, the slew of running backs that he's had over the years, making the ballsy move to put Russell Wilson over Matt Flynn when they threw all that money at him, like the Richard Shermans of the world. Like,
it's a Stanford kid, and then all of a sudden,
who was a wide receiver before he was a corner. Yeah. Like, yeah, man. I think that if that happens, me and you are just going to high five each other and tell everybody that we told you so.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I'm just saying, I'm like, because think about it. I mean, thank God Reggie Bush got his Heisman back, and like,
I'm so happy about that. Yes. Yeah, that was absolutely the right thing to do. Yeah. And the NCAA needed a win. I mean, let's be honest, they needed a win.
Yeah, the NCAA, and speaking of it, because here's the funny thing is the I went on my show and I'm like, I cannot believe that the fact that I am watching the NCAA be so petty, because the fact of like, they have been trying so hard to take down Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, and you just showed off your cards in the news, and you're just giving Jim a reason not to go back to college, because he's just like, I got Herbert. I'm good here. I'm fine here with the Chargers, So yeah. I was just like, but the fact that in the description, like, all because they're trying to get a kid to get verified on Instagram, like, what are we doing? Like, this is the part where I'm like, this is why you need a CEO in the NCAA, because it's just like, look, I need consistency. I need a balanced schedule that makes sense for a lot of the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Texas, a lot of these teams in the world. And when you put, like, again, they already got rid of Connor Stallions. Okay, he's out. All right. And he's not even a part of this coaching staff. He was just a staffer. And so it's like, when you look at Michigan this year with Sharon Moore, I have a very good feeling that he keeps the defensive culture because of what he did in Jim Harbaugh's absence. He kept the energy. He kept everybody level-headed. And I also do think that they were still playing pretty hard. Is that safe for me to say? Because I think, again, Donovan Edwards is going to be fun to watch with the trench battle warfare. But that defense of Michigan, I think even with Jesse Minter gone, I think we may still see the same result, right?
Yeah, I think with Michigan, it's a coin toss, man, with me, because I wasn't high on them last year, and definitely having a dual-headed quarterback like that, or running backs like they had with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards is something that cannot be scoffed at and not overlooked. I don't know if people just don't understand how good Blake Corum was. JJ McCarthy didn't throw the ball a lot, man. I know we talk about it a lot, and I'll be the first one to tell you, I wasn't the biggest fan of him, but I knew that the dude had talent. I just wanted to see it more. That's all that I was saying. That was my only objection. I liked him more than I liked Drake May, I'll tell you that. But, at the end of the day, Donovan Edwards had a slow year up until the second half of that season, and then he showed out in the national championship when it matters. But, a lot of people just like to sweep the issue under the rug. Like, yeah, he wasn't all that great, but in the game he showed up. But you won't get that chance in the NFL where you have to show up every single week. So having this mentality that, I'm just going to run for 200, 300 yards on you and in the big games doesn't really work out that way. And you're only going to be remembered that you ran good against, good teams and got beat against bad teams. Like, it's like the same way with JJ McCarthy throwing 3 interceptions against Bowling Green. Everybody forgets about that, but there was no other quarterback in this draft or in the country that did that against a Group of 5 school that was considered to be a top quarterback. You know what I'm saying? So Their defense was obviously really, really good. They had 6 offensive linemen that got drafted this year.
Yeah.
They had Colston Lovell in there, who's an awesome tight end. And that's where Sharon Moore is, he used to be their offensive line and tight ends coach. So that's where he's going to recruit, and he's always going to keep them good. Now, will Wink Martindale continue the success on that defense as well? They got some pieces there. I just don't know if that team that we saw in Michigan is going to be the complete team that we saw over the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
Jim Harbaugh wins everywhere that he's at. You know this, Jack. We've seen him win at Stanford. Stanford has not been good. Yep. Stanford had a 1-loss season.
And turn that program around. And all of a sudden, and what's funny is I kept telling everybody, you're seeing him with Justin Herbert right now. The closest quarterback stature he ever had at his caliber was Andrew Luck. And he produced so many really good NFL pros at that time at Stanford.
Yeah. He's a quarterback guy. And you can honestly say this is probably the best quarterback, in the NFL, because he did what he did with Andrew Luck. Yep. But this is the best quarterback that he's coached in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Colin Kaepernick coming over from Nevada, we get it, was a great story. He was good at the time, got them to a Super Bowl, anchored that offense. But if Colin Kaepernick, outside of his issues, was a great quarterback, he'd be on the team right now.
Yeah, he'd be signed tomorrow.
It'd be so hard to not sign him if he was really that guy, regardless of his issues. We've seen what Xavier Howard, as much as a freaking weirdo he is, people are still talking about signing him because you know why? Talent reigns supreme. He produces. So if Colin was really that good, he'd be on the team right now. But I think I'm very high on the Chargers. We're going to talk about that next week. We started giving our final predictions. We'll get into the Chargers next week. You're going to be very happy, but a little sneak peek. I think they're runners up, and they're going to have more than 10 wins in this season. I got them with more than 10 wins this season, and I think it's going to surprise people. I might be drinking the Kool-Aid, but I think that team is way more talented than what people give them credit for. And the one thing that I think is going to happen is, out of everything that they've had, I think they're going to have a fairly healthy season. Yeah. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to cut back on how rough that those practices have been when Brandon Staley was there. Because I think Brandon Staley was kind of a rough coach when it came to that stuff. You got to prove it. You got to prove it. You got to prove it. But then when it came you're a Chargers fan. When it came game time, he wasn't proving it to anybody.
Yeah, he couldn't prove to me like you were meant to be an NFL coach. And it's just like, come on, man. And here's what's funny about that is even with a hard culture, I watched Joey Bosa in a playoff game throw his helmet twice on national television, and you're not doing anything about that? Like, that's not happening on Harbaugh's eyes because he's coming in, he's going to bark at you, and then you need to get over it and get back on that field. And I mean, look at this. I mean, Zach Zinter, when he got down on an injury, what did Blake Corum do the next game? He scored a touchdown. That's why I'm like, you got to find a way to move past it. Get your head back in the game and just find a way to score. Find a way to get a stop. Like that's what Jim Harbaugh is so big on.
Bringing Greg Roman in works better for Jim Harbaugh than it would for the Ravens any day of the week because Lamar Jackson is such an anomaly. But Greg Roman works when he has a pocket guy that, Justin Herbert's athletic. Let's not get it wrong. Everybody knows that he's not just going to stand like a statue and not let anything happen to him. He's going to get out there and run for a couple yards if he can. But you can't contain the beast that is Lamar Jackson and try to game plan for that. And inside of your, when you're game planning for the games every single week, it doesn't happen like that. Now that you have brought, if Greg Roman wasn't so respected, then why did he bring J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards with him?
Yep.
I try to tell people this all the time. I'm like,
Jefferson. I mean,
yeah. I'm like, y'all think he sucks so bad, but then why do these players constantly follow him everywhere that he goes?
They say that he's going to take the ball away out of Justin Herbert's hands. I'm like, Harbaugh's a former quarterback. You really think he's going to do that? You really think he's going to let Greg Roman really just kind of run that way? I never understand. Jim
has always game planned. If it's working, we're going to keep doing it.
Yes.
And if you didn't walk away from the Penn State game last year where JJ threw 8 passes, they're running it down their throats. Why do we need to pass the ball? Man, if I could reserve my quarterback, sorry, JJ, we're going to run it again because they can't stop us. You think JJ's going to be like, man, I'm going to throw the ball more, coach? Nope. We won't win this game. That's the most important. So if JK and Gus are going off, whatever. It keeps a healthy Justin Herbert at the end of the day keep going and getting you more wins down the road.
Oh, absolutely, man. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, man, I'm excited for this season because especially like it's different when you have just a coach than you have a culture setting coach. And that's where you really are. You are feeling. I mean, I'm in the middle of a lightning storm in Denver. I feel it. I feel Harbaugh's presence with that rain, with those lightning. Like it's just, it was a perfect match in heaven. And so I'm excited for the Chargers season this year, but I will tell you what though. So a year that needs to happen. You've seen me really try to defend this program because I think people just jump the wagon so quickly. But Ohio State, they have got to win this year. I think because of that is the seat is so hot for Ryan Day. And I've explained to a lot of Buckeye fans, I'm like, look, it is one thing that if you are losing to anybody not named Michigan in your conference, you'd be out of a job tomorrow. Okay. Like you're losing to a Michigan State. You're losing to another like low-end Big Ten program. You're out of a job, man. Like that can't cut it. But because you're only losing to your conference rival, I mean, he was going to get it eventually. So when you outlook Ohio State, because I've heard some positive stuff about Will Howard and what the offense, the outlook of this is going to look like. You got Emeka Egbuka back. I mean, this is too rich for Ohio State not to win the national championship, isn't it?
Yeah. Ohio State, if you guys watched the show yesterday, I picked them. It was going to be them and Oregon, which is going to be weird to have 2 Big Ten teams, but I figured in the 12-team bracket, they're going to find themselves in to be in the national championship. I think those are the 2 best rosters in America, not just on paper, but just with a lot to prove. And he's been a coach for 6 seasons now, 56-8. But when I really crunched the numbers the other day, this is his record against ranked teams, 15-8. So 8 of his losses were against ranked teams, and they were against important games. It was like 3 or 4 CFP games that he's been in, and he's 1-3 against Michigan. The point of playing in the Big Ten, especially if you're the coach of Michigan or the coach of Ohio State, is you have to beat your rival team. Literally in Ann Arbor, they rebuilt that Michigan stadium to be the loudest and the biggest in the country to intimidate Ohio State when they play in their house. Like, this rivalry goes really, really deep. If they, Paul Feinbaum, I don't always agree with him, but he did say one thing. He said if they don't beat Michigan this year, he's going. If they don't make the CFP, he's going. If they play against a team that they should win against and have an early exit from the CFP, he's going. Like, there's 3 different scenarios there where this guy, I'm not the biggest Ryan Day fan, and I truly believe this. When Bill O'Brien was brought in to be their OC, after they gave Brian Hartline the curb, they said, okay, you were OC, it's not really working. You just keep recruiting wide receivers. The Bill O'Brien in, the first thing I said to my guys is I was like, he's there as a security blanket if he gets fired, because Bill O'Brien is going to be a good coach. Then he goes and takes the job at Boston College. Then they snatch Chip Kelly away from UCLA. Jake, I think this whole thing about him not wanting to recruit is a smokescreen. You can't tell me that Chip Kelly does not want to be the coach of Ohio State University.
Oh, yeah. Dude, it's such a rich program. How could you not?
Chip Kelly worries about winning, and now you're giving him a taste of what that team is going to be like. I said this last night. Ohio State has built this team like they have PTSD from the 2023 Michigan Wolverines. Yep. They went in and got, Michigan struggled against very athletic safeties. They went and got the best safety in the country in Caleb Downs from Alabama. Then they go and get the best running back that was in the portal and Quinshon Judkins, which you got him and TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson couldn't stay healthy last year or the year prior to that. You give Chip Kelly, who's a running game beast, yeah, they're gonna run the ball down your throat. Then you go, and I can't believe, like, if this was on a bingo card for people thought I was insane. I said, Will Howard entered the transfer portal from Kansas State. And then Kyle McCord left to Syracuse. I said, man, if they go and get Will Howard, they're winning the national championship. I feel the same way like when the trade happened with Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff. I called it. I said, Matthew Stafford going to win the Super Bowl this year, and they proceeded to win. So if I'm keeping the same energy, Jake, Will Howard going there is the best fit for them. And when they announced him as a starter, I said it's over for everybody. I'm sorry. Go ahead, hang it up, because you can't tell me Emeka Ibuka still being there with Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Enos. Like, the only question mark on that team is tight end.
Yeah.
And I don't know if G. Scott Jr. can kick it into gear. Maybe it's because Cade Stover's been there for years and was, he was the number one guy. But G. Scott gets to come in there as like an athletic guy that I think he used to play quarterback as well. But, he's coming in there as a tight end, super athletic kid with the running game. Then they go pick up a center. I forget what that kid's name is. They pick him up from Oklahoma, I believe. And he comes in and he's just going to anchor them. Seth McLaughlin from Alabama, not Oklahoma. Yeah. Seth McLaughlin comes in from Alabama. So you get an SEC pedigree center. It's nasty work out here, Jake. I'm telling you. They're the national champions.
They are building something really special. And that's why I told a lot of Ohio State fans, I'm like, pump the brakes a bit, because all it's going to take is just for that flip to switch, like that switch to flip. And then Ohio State, you're going to be happy with the fact that when they're national champions, you're just going to give high praises to Ryan Day and all the rest of this other stuff. So I'm like, come on.
I'll tell you, the best birthday present that they have, like, I think they're losing against Oregon. And that's the only reason Oregon gets into the Big Ten championship. But, I had them, I think, at number 5 in my rankings before the playoffs start. And people are like, well, if they lose to Oregon, how do you ship them all the way back up to the number 5 spot? Because they play Michigan their last game, and Michigan's going to be probably ranked in the top 10 by the time that they play. And then you can't argue out of any team in college football that they were not deserving to be the number 5 team based off of strength of schedule alone. They have a tough schedule.
Yeah.
And if they play Oregon and make it let's say it's a 1-score game, because I think it's going to be. I think the only reason that Oregon beats them is because they're playing them at Autzen Stadium and, out there in Oregon. If it was in Ohio State, I'd be hard-pressed to say that Ohio State wins that game and might go undefeated this year. Like, that's how razor thin I think this is. So when we're talking about humans being in a room that's saying these are the 12 teams, it'd be hard pressed for somebody to say, yeah, do we think Ohio State can beat everybody in this bracket? Yeah, they might be able to. Okay, so the only spot that we can put them in outside of the 4 conference champions is 5. Go ahead, put them in 5 because we can justify it. It's going to be something like that, and it's going to blow people's mind, and I'm going to be sitting here, and I'm just going to be laughing. I'm like, well, there you go. They're about to set a monster up now.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, yeah, this is going to be something fun to watch. I'll tell you what, though, because with a lot of these changes, and especially with the 12-team playoff, I mean, so Nick Saban, he ends up retiring because the NIL just wore him out. Like, he could not really adjust to the new college football kind of look these days. Yep. Which is why, like, I mean, you and I have been kind of bashing on the door on NBA of like, dude, put some respect on college hoops, man, because the fact that the NIL is working this much for college football, this is why that we have day one starters from the get-go, because the product is just so good. And yet I have said that the transfer portal, it needs to happen when everything is done, because to have that in like the postseason, just it screws everybody up out of their game. So I figured you get the rest of the season done, then get the transfer portal. That's college football's way of the off season, like the NFL. So It's like the NIL with all these kids getting paid, all the rest of it. It's keeping these kids up in college to get more of the college experience. I mean, for God's sakes, when are we, like, honestly, is this finally the year that we'll get to see, Cam Rising finally go into the NFL for as long as he's been in college? So, Alabama now with Kalen DeBoer, which brought us a point. Washington was in the national championship with Kalen DeBoer, and then he said, I'm taking Alabama, bye-bye. Like, people are going to take these high-quality jobs. It's nothing against Washington. I think Washington will be fine. The Pacific Northwest always seems to be producing really good players. But, the state of Alabama with Kalen DeBoer, there were some guys that were initially going into the transfer portal and wanting to maybe potentially change. Yep. But then there was a bit of a change of vision here. So how do you really prospect Kalen DeBoer in Alabama? Because this SEC, it's still going to be arguably one of the best conferences in college football, but yet it's going to have a little bit of that plot twist now with even adding Steve Sarkisian with Texas there. I'm not really sold on Oklahoma in the SEC. I think they're probably
they've had a lot of injuries in the offseason too.
Yeah,
it sucks for them.
Rut, man. But this is an interesting look of Alabama this year.
Yeah, obviously Jalen Milroe is the one guy that everybody wants to hone in on, right? I mean, he's the brightest spot there. The benching that happened with him last year and Nick Saban telling him to take a back seat and tell him to get himself together was the best come to Jesus meeting for any player that happened last year, because people were even saying towards the end of the season, like, Jalen Milroe might be in Heisman contention for how well that he's playing. Yep. I think now some people are way higher on Alabama than I am, but I will say this. If Jalen Milroe can have the type of season that Jaden Daniels had last year, it'd be hard-pressed to say that he's not going to be in the Heisman or have that team put on his back. But I also think that Kalen DeBoer, if there's anybody that can fix his accuracy issues, which is, I mean, he has a huge arm, but let's just say he wasn't overthrowing, my boy and Jermaine Burton, who's playing tonight for the Bengals. Like, if he wasn't able just to, overthrow him, Jermaine Burton would have been a 1,000-yard receiver with about 20 touchdowns. Like, that's how crazy it would have been, but he's just not that accurate, right? But I think that was the single-handed most important move that happened last year. Their offensive line is probably the best in the country next to LSU. I don't know which one's better, but I'm willing to say that that's going to be a bright spot, especially for them. After losing their center, they go in, and when Kalen DeBoer came over, Parker Braceford came over from Washington, so they just fell right back in the spot that they left off. So, a national championship caliber guy. Then they get Jeremy Bernard, who comes over from Washington too. That was part of that stacked wide receiving core. But I really think that people need to focus on probably, I've talked about running back duos, and I think you're going to see a bunch of them, like Marcus Carroll and Noel, Nate Noel from Missouri. I think they're going to be good. James Jordan and Noah Whittington up in Oregon. I think they're going to be underrated. But another underrated pair is going to be Justice Haynes and Jan Miller. Like, they might be the two best running backs in the country that nobody's talking about. And they're only sophomores and juniors, so they might have another year of eligibility after this. Like, if they can rely on them and Jalen Milroe can just be a little bit better in the passing game and just allow him to be as dynamic as he can be, I think the play calling from Kalen DeBoer is going to be dynamic enough where they have some deficiencies at wide receiver. But I don't think Kendrick Law and Kobe Printons are not, pushover wide receivers, especially when you match them up with Jeremy Bernard, who knows what it's like to get to a national championship. And then their defense, they've had a couple guys leave, but like Malachi Moore is still there. Devontae Smith, he's there. Not the wide receiver. There's another Devonta Smith that's with them. Jahad Campbell. There's a couple guys on that squad that could be day one, day two guys for Alabama in the draft this upcoming season. So they're going to be solid, man. I just don't know if they're going to be able to put it together. I always get concerned with a lot of guys that leave and come in. I've been saying I'm going to keep the same energy like I've been keeping with Colorado. Colorado got 40-something transfers in, and that whole offensive line that they said was rebuilt, when you look at their depth chart, none of those guys are going to be starters. So it's because they're not they're not going to be able to mesh well right away. There's too many different guys from too many different programs, played in too many different systems for you to even know what the left and right hand are doing right now. So, and then you add a new head coach on top of that. The best thing for Kalen DeBoer is that Nick Saban has an office there, and Nick Saban has an open door policy. He can go in and ask him exactly how he should handle that team and how to upstand that legacy there. I don't think there was probably a better coach in the country that could have took that job. I think Dan Lannon is too young in his career right now to have gone out there. I think that would have been just career suicide, if you want my honest opinion on that. But there was two guys that I was like, go get that job. It was Kalen and Jed Fish. Mm-hmm. Everybody else's name that was thrown in the pot, I was like, I don't think they can handle it. But I'm looking forward to Kalen DeBoer doing really, really well, probably his second year. I mean, still, I think they had, the number 3 recruiting class?
Yep, they had the number 3 recruiting class.
Yep. Thanks, Nick. So you get some of those guys that come in, right? But if Jed Fish goes to Florida, the SEC is just going to be back on top, and the teams that we used to look at that were good are just going to be good again. There's really good coaches out there, man, but I think Alabama's severely getting looked over. I just don't have them as high. I think Sora actually has him in his national championship game losing to Oregon. So, there are people that are really high on them for sure.
Well, and it's funny because there's always a story in college football with a lot of these coaches. And so, like, when you see that, again, like, you'll never know exactly, like, how these coaches, how they will transform a program. I mean, we've seen this multiple times with Matt Rule when it came to, Baylor and Temple, and then what he's doing right now with Nebraska. It is kind of hard to predict it, but, you get guys like that can turn a program around. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And I think, the best break is that the fact that he has a top 3 recruiting class. So that's what's a really good break for Kalen DeBoer. So week 0, man. I mean, I have a new segment up on my show that I will be producing up. It's basically like my 3-pick treat for college football, because in the end, I mean, I'm in for the NFL, and you already know that with prime predictions and with now this year, the Inferno 5 that I'm sharing with everybody because of our good partners at BetUS. They always love taking care of us. But what should we expect at least with week 0? Because there is so many different stories here and there that I am just excited to watch a lot of these matchups and to get a good, clear idea of what the college football season is really going to look like all season long.
Yeah, let's start with Montana State at New Mexico, man. New Mexico Bronco Mendenhall is coming in as their head coach. If you've known anything about Bronco Mendenhall, he was the coach at BYU for many, many years from 2005 to 2015. They went to a bowl game every single year that he was a coach there. So, and then he went to Virginia, and he's got some experience there too, which is a hard program to kind of turn around being in the ACC. But hopefully you can have New Mexico as like the next project that he's going to. I mean, these aren't easy schools to coach at, like, and try to keep up with the recruiting classes and things like that. So hopefully he can turn them around. But like Montana State coming over as an FCS school, they're number 4 overall in their AP poll there right now. Tommy Mellett is going to get his first start at quarterback, and he's going to, he was splitting. They were running like a 2 quarterback system there with him and Sean Chambers, but Sean Chambers graduated, so now he gets to take a run at that. The dude in 3 years has had over 2,400 rushing yards. So what you're going to see from them having a number 2 running crew in FCS, averaging almost 300 yards a game, they're going to run it down New Mexico's throat. So that's the first storyline. An FCS school beating an FBS school. So get that one out the way. Hawaii and Delaware State, back in the state that I used to live at, in Delaware, but they got to come all the way from across the country and travel to Hawaii. They've had some issues with their flights and like charter buses missing things. And so they haven't been in Hawaii as long as they probably want to. So they're going to be, battling jet lag and things like that. But everybody knows, the legendary quarterback Timmy Chang, who was their quarterback at Hawaii a couple years ago, is now their head coach. He's 8-18 out there. He's getting better. Braden Shager decided, he was a transfer portal guy, decided to stay back. But, Steve McBride is having some legal issues, but I think he's going to be back after his 1K season. But there's a wide receiver in the country that I think is going to break out. Pofele Ashlock. Look out for this dude. He had like 83 catches last year. I think he was a true freshman last year as well. Look out for him to break out. I think it's going to be an absolute beatdown. So that's the other storyline, is you're going to see a borderline first-degree murder happen on Delaware State. SMU at Nevada is the other game. Like there was one guy I used to watch, every once in a while I'll pull up the film of some quarterbacks around the country in high school as I try to get prepared, for the next season. And one of them that I just kept coming back to the tape was Preston Stone from SMU. And when Tanner Mordecai left for Wisconsin last year, I was the one that was waving the flag. I said he's going to pick up right where he left off. He did. He got hurt at the end of the season, which hurt them a little bit. But the dude he's a beast, and now he's coming over to ACC, and he really gets to flex his muscles, which is a blessing in disguise. I mean, this dude had offers from all the big name schools and decided to stay at SMU because he is from Dallas. Nevada, oh man, they're going to have it rough again. It was a 2-win. I think they only had 2 wins last season. They're going to struggle again. They had a lot of pieces left. A lot of them went to Hawaii because Timmy Chang was their old coach there. He was the old assistant coach there. So, but I think that's the other murder that you're going to see. So it's going to be 2 first-degree murder. And then the last one, I mean, I'm a Florida State guy, Florida State and Georgia Tech. I think it's going to be a close, ugly game. I think it's going to be fun to watch. I hope that it's back and forth because I think people are not giving Georgia Tech the respect that they deserve. Haynes King is a better quarterback than what people give him credit for. Brent Key, as a former offensive lineman, is building that offensive line up, and they already had a 1,000-yard running back in Jamal Haynes. Me and Sawyer went down to the Gasparilla Bowl as media members last year and got to see them, have a good game against UCF, which they haven't been to a bowl game in what was like 5 or 6 years or something like that. So, yeah, seeing them get the win, and they were emotional after that game. I think they're going to be for real this year, man. But I still think Florida State squeaks that one out. But as DJ Uyunglele coming over from Oregon State, he played at Clemson. I still have a big belief in him. I can't deny that he does have some deficiencies, but like the ups are up with him. And I hope if there's any coach in the country that can get him playing like Jordan Travis was playing the last year, is Mike Norvell, because I didn't have a lot of faith in that Jordan Travis was going to be that great either. So, I mean, you can kind of talk about that. Mike Norvell's kind of a quarterback guru on his own too. They got some tough games this year though, but this will be their first tough one, traveling out of the country. And starting out against an ACC conference rival as well in Georgia Tech. It's going to be a good game, man. So what what a weekend to kind of see, an FCS school kind of see them in the fold, kind of see Hawaii and what they're about this year, see if they're going to improve, seeing SMU as an ACC team, see what they do against Nevada. You kind of get, seeing Jalen Knighton be on that team now as well from last year when he transferred from Miami. You kind of get to see him come back. And then Florida State and Georgia Tech. It's ACC weekend, it seems like, but there's a lot of storylines here. But I wouldn't miss out on any of these games. They're all spread out. I mean, from 12 p.m. to 11, I think it was like 11:45 p.m. that night when they played the Hawaii game. So you got a full slate of games all day that, all have different things that you can look forward to for sure.
That's what I'm saying, man. I mean, like with college football being back, 12-team playoff, every single team now, like there's always a new storyline that hits me. Like I said, I mean, I'm keeping an eye out on Ole Miss this year with Jackson Dart and what Lane Kiffin's going to do there, because they got an overhaul in the transfer portal from both offense and defensively. Now I know Quinshon Judkins, it's definitely going to be different in that tailback room, but I think they'll be okay. But I mean, Texas with Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian, I mean, if I got another year of Quinn Ewers, the way he looked this year, then the possibilities are very good for the Longhorns. But there are so many other teams up out there that could very much sneak themselves up into this one. I'm excited for week 0. And, like I said, with my good partners at BetUS gifting me college football 25, the most realistic game out there, and especially now with Madden 25 coming out, I mean, it just gets better and better from there. And so, free copy of it. For those of you who have not checked it out, it is the most realistic game on the market from coaching standpoint, college recruitment, even, the performances in the classroom, which is a new thing, because that really determines, your potential dynasty you're building in your college football program. And so check it out for yourselves.
I got one of my players suspended one day because there was a girl that asked me, hey, you want to come to this party? And I went to the party and got suspended for 1 week.
But see,
it's realistic, man.
Exactly, and it doesn't get no more real than that. College football 25, rated E for everyone on all consoles that you can get your hands on. Thanks to my good partners at BetUS. Week 0, I will have my picks. But when you sign up at BetUS, 125% bonuses on your first 3 deposits of $50 or more to getting you into all the contests. 2,500 in winnings. That's a lot to really kind of look at, especially with a stacked week 0. Plenty of contests to go around. Check it out at BetUS.com. BetUS, where the game begins. Dante, always a pleasure, man. I mean, I'm going to love it having you up on the show once a week, man, and getting all the college football fixes. This show, like I said, when it is college football and it is NFL season, like I'm blocking everything out. Like I am focused, I'm determined, and I'm ready to win it this year with all these bets, and even with enjoying college football 25, man. This is going to be a great year for college football.
For sure, man. Yeah, look forward to coming back more often and, talking more football with you. And you know how we do on our side. Constant content getting pushed out every single day. So now it's I feel like this is my second job. It's time to get to work until the off season starts back up. But it's obviously everybody's favorite time of the year when it comes to sports.
Like I said, plenty of football to go around, and there is plenty of evaluations to really kind of look at with a lot of these prospects, man. So I'm excited for it, man. Appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of the week, man. And I'll see you soon, having you back up on the show, my friend. College is going to be out of this world, and I have to be in the know of what's going on in the college football realm, man.
For sure, Jake. Appreciate you, man. And everybody that watched, appreciate you watching, and hit that subscribe button for Jake, man. He's doing, he does this almost every damn day. So
I'm working on getting these damn watch hours up on here, because we are.
I feel you.
Like, I'm putting in all the work with all these interviews lately, and it's like the watch hours haven't even been there. I've been like, what in the world's going on? So subscribe and smash the shares, man. We got to get up here. We got to get monetized, man. That's the goal. That's the goal, is we got to get monetized, man.
For sure. Hey, man, everybody have a good rest of your day and a good rest of your week. Thanks, Jake, for having me again.
Yes, sir. Oh, man, college football is going to be an absolute hit. I'm excited for it, man. And again, there's going to be a lot of these stories. I look forward, to having the college football season really look like it's utmost best. I mean, there's no complaints at this point now moving forward. So I'm excited for it. I'm excited about it because at least Dante will come in, every week and give me his insights, what he's seeing. So I'm excited for it. I'm glued on for the football season altogether. College, NFL, you name it. Appreciate everybody. Now, I know I mentioned about the NFC breakdown. Next week, I promise, I will have it there for you guys. But of course, because of time constraints, we definitely got to wrap it up from here. But I appreciate all of you guys for being up on here on the show. So a special shout out to all of my great guests that were on here tonight. Dante Sell, East Coast Gridiron, Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints, and Desmond Johnson of Bleav in Panthers. Boy, what a show. What a week. Got a lot done. But I appreciate everybody for joining here and hanging out with me all week long. Next week is going to be even more stacked because the NFL season's right around the corner. Got a lot of storylines to really hit up this year. So as I've said before, the show sponsored by BetUS, where the NFL season begins. $50 or more, 125% bonuses, up to $2,500 in earnings in your first 3 deposits. Check it out for yourself at BetUS.com, where the NFL season begins. Gambling problem, call the number. Seek help, seek accountability as well, seek therapy, and to get you right. Because at BetUS, we want you to gamble responsibly. We want you to have all the fun. So, also by SeatGeek, for this year in college football season and even in the NFL season, find your seat at the most affordable price. And wherever also that you can find it on SeatGeek.com. Concerts with your favorite artists, so much more. Use promo code SnakeSports for $20 off on your first purchase of your first ticket to enjoy the experience and see why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Download it on your mobile device to Google Play in the App Store. Jake the Snake Silva signing off here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. We will see you next week and what we got cooking up for the next interviews here on the show. Appreciate you all for being here. Take care, and we'll see you next week on the Snake Sports Talk Show. See you later, everyone.